and welcome to Thoughts in the Green Room with your host, Geoff Mays. This week, we're going to talk about one of the most important skills for an actor, which I believe is listening, and how you can practice it in your day-to-day life. So, when I think about acting and the myriad of skills that we need to do to become effective on stage or screen, the one thing that stands out for me that I believe is the most important for any actor is the ability to actively listen to their scene partner. The reason I say this is because active listening engages not only yourself and your scene partner on stage or screen, but it also actively engages the audience and draws them into your piece. And one of the things that I often hear, which I think is the greatest disservice to any actor, is when, and I know I've said this myself when I was younger, I've heard it not too long ago, I've heard others say it over the years, is these simple words. Hey, don't worry about it, man, you'll get it, but just make sure you get the cue line right. And when we say that statement, what we are actually saying is, don't worry, I'm not listening to you anyway. I just want to have my turn to talk on stage or screen. Because we're not engaging with our fellow scene partner in that moment. If all we care about is picking up our cue to make sure we get our lines right, there's no engagement. It's just two talking heads. I have to wait for the words, the boy went to the store. The boy went to the store. He hasn't said the boy went to the store yet. Yeah, oh, and there's the cue. Boy went, and here's my dialogue. How boring is that? There's no engagement, there's no response, there's no connection to the emotion, what was possibly just given to me. I don't know if there was any emotion just given to me because I wasn't listening. I was waiting for my cue. Now, of course, I'm talking and I've got control of the scene because I'm so great and these are my words, but my scene partner is doing the exact same thing. They're not hearing a single thing, and even if I'm in my greatest possible moment ever to share and I've emoted beyond all emotion, it will not be returned. It will not be received. And the audience is sitting out there going, man, this is boring. Well, of course it's boring. You got two people who are talking to themselves. How boring is that? When we actively listen, what we're doing is actively hearing the words and emotions and context that our scene partner is giving to us. And I believe that it is the greatest challenge for an actor because, especially if you're on stage, when you've heard the same dialogue hundreds of times over, how do you stay engaged in it? How do you ensure that you continue to listen rather than just wait for your cue? How do you stay active rather than being bored hearing the same show over for the 100th time? When we do take that moment and we learn this skill, what happens is the engagement between actors creates real emotion. And that translates out to the audience, and the audience then is drawn in, and it becomes a greater, more prominent piece. Let me give you an example. Let's say an actor's mother is gone away on some sort of retreat where they have zero connection to the outside world for 6 months. And the actor on stage gets the great line of, I lost my mother. Really traumatic, horrible experience for this character, a passing of the family. And for the last 5 years, they've been on this Broadway production, this long-standing piece, and the climax of the whole entire play is when the actor says, I lost my mother. Really great, Shatner moment, if you will. The other actor's response is, of course, don't worry, we'll get through this. And big, huge applause and whatnot, because you know that these characters are going to go on and survive the tragedy of the lost parent, right? It's 5 years running on Broadway. It's doing a wonderful job as it is. But this specific night on stage, the actor who's been dying to tell their mother something, and their mother is on retreat and they can't communicate with them, has that true experience, that true feeling of what it's like to have lost their mother. And it gets to the climactic moment in the play, and they say, I lost my mother. And it's a revelation for them in real life as well as for the character. Now, the other actor on stage who is not actively listening at this point turns around and says, hey, don't worry about it, we'll get through it, because they've said it 1,000 times over already. And the audience, they get this moment where they go, wow, that was really intense. The character lost their mother. And then they hear, hey, don't worry about it, we'll get through it. And they go, what? And everything falls flat. The powerful moment of reality is broken. The magic of theater is ripped from the audience's hands, and it's a boring production. The audience leaves wondering why this show has been running for 5 years on Broadway. Now we take that exact same example. The second actor is actively listening. They see, they hear, they feel the emotion from their scene partner and go, oh, wow, that must really hurt to lose your mother. Whoa, hey, we'll get through it. There's a connection. There's a real moment when the two actors share and relate with each other on stage. Draws them together closely. They give each other a big, huge hug at the end to wrap up the scene and bring the climax of this great theatrical piece to a close. And the audience feels it too. Weeping is going on, people crying, and spouses and partners hugging each other because they can't imagine what it would be like to lose a mother. You get my point. Because of the act of listening, the second actor was able to hear, receive, and give back. This is the first benefit, in my opinion, of active listening. The second benefit that comes out of active listening is the ability to support your scene partner. So let's say we're doing a murder mystery, and I've got the big long monologue, and at the end I say, and did you see the knife on the table? Because that's the big clue that solves the murder mystery. We've all had those moments, folks, where we're in the middle of that big monologue and we just cannot remember it for the life of us. So as I stumble through a couple pieces that I do remember, I get to the end and I haven't said, did you see the knife on the table? Now my scene partner, who is actively listening, watches me stumble, goes, oh man, Geoff is off his rail tonight. Like, I don't know what he's doing, but he is missing all the important information. There's no way you can give it back to me necessarily right away. So my scene partner, who's actively listened, here's the struggle, here's the threat, here's the dropped key words for the audience to understand the entire production. And they do a little piece of improv and they put a couple things together, and in their next dialogue they say, blah, 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 here's my actual line, and did you see the knife on the table? Supported. The audience gets the cue for the murder mystery. I feel supported because my fellow actors picked up where we've left off, and the audience knows no difference about the fact that lines were changed about a bit. So we're able to support each other as well as connect with each other, and this support is what makes the production go around. There drives camaraderie. There's the after effect where I get off stage and go, oh man, thank you so much for covering that, because I had no idea how I was coming back from that, right? There's camaraderie, there's collegiality, there's support, there's friendship, and there's great performance as well. So these are the two big benefits that come out of active listening when it comes to stage. The third being the most obvious, which is just great performances. You're no longer two talking heads on stage. But how do we practice that? How do actors become better listeners? I believe that there are two key things you can do to become a better listener. The first is avoid interruption, and the second is to avoid assumption. And these are things that can be practiced in your real life. Let's talk about interruption first. Typically, when an individual interrupts somebody else, I believe that the primary reason they're doing it is because they hear something that triggers them and they want to show relatability. So they jump into the conversation and cut off the person talking to say, I relate, I connect, I understand what you're saying, because the experience is shared. I don't know. Maybe I'm saying something like, hey, I went to Baskin Robbins yesterday and my buddy jumps in and says, oh, Baskin Robbins is my favorite ice cream store. I so love the fact they've got all those flavors there. Well, My story may not be really about Baskin Robbins. It may be about the person I interacted with in Baskin Robbins, or the person I met after I came out and spilled my ice cream on. I don't know, whatever that story may be, but the interruption is really saying to me, the person talking, that the person who I'm sharing with doesn't give a damn about me. They don't care. They don't hear anything that I'm saying because they're too interested in trying to prove themselves in that connection point by interrupting. It's a very weak connection. And truthfully, from my perspective and from other people I've talked to, it's not only a weak connection, but an active detriment to connection, because the person you're sharing with is saying, I don't care. Just let me talk. Let me prove. I don't want to be proven to. I want you to hear so you can relate with me about the thing I'm describing. Now, the second is assumption, which is the next step often from interruption. Assumption, obviously, is when an individual listening assumes the outcome. So I come home and I say, oh my gosh, I had such a horrible day. My friend who's speaking to me or listening to me assumes that what I need is a hug. So they come over and they give me a hug and say, oh, you'll feel better now. Everything's great. And I'm like, the last thing I needed was a hug, because I had such a horrible day because I was mobbed all day long on my birthday by people giving me hugs. Assumption leading to a greater level of detriment in this case. The demonstration that the person is not listening and that they don't care to listen because they don't want to find out the whole picture. If we take that back a couple steps and I walk in the house and I say to my friend, oh my God, I had such a horrible day because it's my birthday and everybody was hugging me. I felt molested. My friend who I'm telling this to very actively backs away from me, hands up in the air, and they're like, whoa, not touching you, and makes a joke about it by lack of contact and creates humor. And I laugh heartily because of the fact that this is the person who understands what I needed the most. And they've picked it up because they didn't assume. Active listening that leads to and draws that connection together. And I go, wow, this is the person I want to communicate with because they hear me. They provide for me what I want because they listen fully to my story. Now, I have to admit, as somebody who has been working on these two things, interruption, assumption, for many years, and I say working on them meaning I try not to do them in my day-to-day conversation. From my perspective, they're not easy things to get rid of. They are common things that everybody does because of our belief of what those two things do for us in terms of connection, and I believe it's a misnomer. So for actors, if you want to practice better listening, take a look at your day-to-day life. Note how often you interrupt or assume things of others and work to stop those practices. Break the habit. For anybody who's not an actor, who doesn't need to use it for their craft, the exact same thing applies. It just makes you a better human being because you're listening better and connecting better. So obviously my challenge for this week is to take a look at where you catch yourself interrupting or assuming and work on not doing it. See if you can connect better by actively listening. With that said, those are your thoughts from the green room, and I will see you in 1 or 2 weeks.